Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Gridiron Expert. I'm Connor Hibbett. We are introducing something new to the channel this year, doing team previews, where we give you the deep, in-depth analysis that you want for the upcoming college football season. And today we're going to be looking at the San Jose State Spartans out of the Mountain West. And joining us on the show today is Christian Vieira. How are you doing, Christian?
I'm doing pretty good today. How are you doing, Connor?
Doing good. Before we get started here, looking over San Jose State, tell us your affiliation with the university and how you got started.
I transferred here a couple of years ago to San Jose State University. I'm a journalism student. Um, and when I got here, I joined the Spear, which is San Jose State's student-run sports media outlet, and I'm currently the executive editor of the Spear. And I also do cover the San Jose State football team for the local newspaper in San Jose known as the Mercury News.
Gotcha. Okay. And last year, San Jose State, they had some questions entering the season. They had lost a lot of production from the 2023 squad, and that 2023 team, I know some people thought they were the best team in the Mountain West, or at least had the highest ceiling, and some people were cashing in or wanting to cash in those tickets for SJSU to win the Mountain West that year. And so they had some questions entering last year, and they ended up having a really good season. They had a tremendous receiving core. My goodness, one of the best receiving cores, not just in the G5, but the entire country. And now this year, it's a new look receiving core, and of course, every single team has a lot of new faces with the portal era, this day and age of college football. So we'll get into it, starting with the San Jose State offense and the quarterback position. Now, I know that there's some experience returning there, and is it Eget? Is that how you pronounce it? Walker Eget?
Yeah, Walker Eget. Yeah.
Yeah, and so he's probably going to be at least one of the team leaders, if not the team captain overall, right?
Yes, he is one of the team captains. I think they announced it earlier this week. So that was something interesting going into the season where they kind of named him the starter early on in the process. I think I talked to Coach Kenny Matalolo in January at a press conference, and he said early on that, yeah, Walker's going to be our leader going forward, especially after last year. It was Emmett Brown started the year, and they kind of was a point in the season where they benched him, but then they would go back and forth, even in the middle of drives, and it was a little bit confusing for Spartan fans. But now that Walker Egan is the sole starter, I think there's a lot less confusion and allows for more chemistry to build with him and the receivers this offseason.
And it's not just Walker that the coaches are very confident in. There seems to be a younger guy that has a very bright future ahead of him that might be getting some playing time this year.
Yeah, that would be Tama Amasone. I think I'm saying that right, but Tama, and he's a freshman, and they are very excited about him from what I've heard. In the spring game, he actually cranked off a 55-yard rushing touchdown. That kind of, Spartan fans are like, oh, who is this freshman? And I think what he brings to the table is something opposite of Walker, where Walker really is a great passer. From my understanding, offense coordinator Craig Stutzman explained that Tama, I mean, he's a true freshman, so he can improve a lot in the passing game. But what he brings to the Spartans is athleticism at the quarterback position, speed, the ability to read options, things like that. So I think the Spartans might possibly use him this year after what we saw in the spring game. He was definitely they called him and Xavier Ward 2A and 2B.
Wow.
But he was definitely the one who came, he was the one who came out after Walker Egan at the spring game. And I think I wouldn't be surprised if he's the sole second quarterback behind Walker and possibly use him in packages in certain situations during the season.
Yeah, I read some articles over the last handful of days following the spring game here recently that he's probably going to be used, just like you said, in certain looks, certain packages, and more running packages than passing packages. But I would not be shocked if they had maybe have a few trick plays with him because I mean yeah, you're right, he is that good of an athlete. And by the way, in the spring game, I'm pretty sure there wasn't full tackling, so he that was a 55-yard untouched scramble touchdown.
Exactly.
Yeah, so yeah,
That's a
yeah.
good note. That's
Yeah,
a
yeah,
great note there.
yeah. It's not like if he's touched, right? It's like the whistles blow. You got to start. You have a new play, but yeah, yeah, he's a very good athlete. So I'm very excited to see the future for San Jose State there. But when you're looking at this year, I briefly discussed the receiving core from last year, and you can go into it more. But there's a lot of new faces there this year, and there's one specific guy that stood out in the spring game, a former Purdue guy, Leland Smith, but. Tell us, what does this receiving core look like I mean, obviously, it's a completely revamped receiving core, but what's the ceiling for this group this year?
I think the ceiling is very high. The coaching staff is very high on this receiving core because of the depth. I think last year was a little top heavy, and there were some really talented guys last year. Obviously, Nick Nash, triple crown wide receiver winner, and Justin Lockhart on the outside also had over 1,000 yards last year. So those two guys is what they had to replace in terms of production, and I think they did a good overall job of getting a deeper room. So, like you said, Leland Smith stood out at the game. He was the only wide receiver to score a touchdown. There was only two touchdowns scored in that spring game, the other one being Thomas. And it was a quick pick, like a pick wide receiver screen at the 2 yard line. But what stood out is his athleticism and his ability to kind of strong arm and strong and get those balls up in the air. Um, I think he's going to be a very good wide receiver for us. I mean, obviously, he comes from a big school, has athleticism. Another guy that had a lot of receptions at the spring game was Matthew Coleman, who is expected to play that slot position, replacing Nick Nash. So maybe there'd be a lot of production from him as well this season. Some other guys that stood out is Danny Scudero, and he didn't really play in the spring game, but the coaching staff, I think, purposely didn't kind of wanted him not to play in the spring game. But what I've heard is that he's kind of been a guy on on the field during spring ball that stood out at practice. So I think he's another guy transferred from Sacramento State. Um, yeah, but there's a lot of guys. I think that room is pretty deep overall. I mean, even guys like Malachi Riley, who transferred, I think, from Arizona. Also, Cooper Hoke, who's a returning guy last year, who we saw get a little bit of touches, and maybe he'll get a little more this season.
Yeah, you're right. This does look like a pretty deep room because like Matthew Coleman, I think he was fourth in the team in receiving yards, I want to say last
Yes.
season. And like some of the depth charts that I'm looking up right now, like have him as second string. But even if he ends up being first string, it just points to the depth because as you pointed out, Danny, Malachi, Leland, is there what's going to be Jahari Johnson's role?
I think he's going to be an outside receiver. We didn't see too many plays from him. There was some at the spring game. I think he's going to be outside receiver. Another thing that I forgot to mention too is originally going into this spring game, Trayshawn Hurry was supposed to be our wide receiver one from what I was hearing, but he transferred to Louisville. Kind of surprisingly, I think the team wasn't really expecting it. The coaching staff wasn't really expecting it, but he was kind of leading the room as an outside wide receiver. We saw him play really well last year, so that was kind of I think when they were talking about the depth, they had him in mind. But I think they're still happy with the depth overall in the wide receiver room.
So the depth is not a question. It seems to be of high quality. But who's going to be the alpha, you think, in this room? Or is there going to be an alpha?
It's hard to tell right now. I think possibly Leland Smith. I mean, from what I've seen and what I've heard about his athleticism, as long as he can, once he gets accustomed to the offense, maybe he will be that guy on the outside receiver, something different than last year when Nick Nash was being a slot guy who was kind of the alpha last year. Maybe it's a little different. I don't know. That might be my guess if he develops in this offense and gets a better understanding of it, but come fall.
Yeah, you mentioned in the spring game that Smith stood out in terms of getting the 50-50 balls, which is
Yeah.
something that San Jose State had. Like they had two incredible receivers last year that it's like you could try to stop them. San Jose State could tell you, hey, we're going to throw to Nash or we're going to throw to Lockhart, and you still could stop them. And so it'll be interesting to see if San Jose State has a guy that steps up to just be a dude and be a difference maker. But obviously, a lot of good players to choose from there. So the tight end room, I believe they had a guy transfer to Louisville in the spring portal window as well. How is the tight end room looking right now?
Yeah, so Jacob Stewart did transfer to the tight end room, and he got a lot of playing time last year. It was kind of split pretty evenly between him and Jackson Cannon, who is still around. But now what I expect is Jackson Cannon to step up, and also Grant Norberg. He transferred here a year ago from UCLA. He's 6'7", so that kind of stands out when you see him. I think he might get some more playing time as well. But I expect those two to kind of step up into that role after Jacob Stewart transferring out.
And they're both very experienced. I believe they're both redshirt seniors, so they have
Yes.
experience on their side. Last year, like the passing game was obviously the strength of the offense. The running game, is there higher expectation for the rushing attack this season?
Yes. After the spring game, we were kind of talking in the press conference. Coach Ken and Coach Stutz kind of both talked about that. Stutz been saying that kind of Nimatalolo came to him after last season and saying, I think part of the offense we can improve is the run game. Obviously, San Jose State's spread and shred offense is pass heavy offense, but I think that's something Ken noticed that maybe that could have been the difference maker in some of those big games we lost, especially that bowl game. I think he said he was thinking about the most. So going forward with the run game, I think a big name obviously is Floyd Chalk the fourth. He's a guy who was our starter last year. And it was split between him and Jabari Bates last year, as well as Lamar Radcliffe, who was a freshman last season, so he's a sophomore this year. Um, I think maybe those three are going to kind of get some playing time. And we did see Lamar Radcliffe, who's a bigger back, listed at 6'2", get some more playing time towards the end of the year, especially in that Stanford game, the last game of the season, and the Hawaii Bowl. So maybe he'll get some more playing time this year. But it looked like the depth chart is Floyd Chalk, Jabari Bates, then Lamar Radcliffe, same as last season.
And Floyd Chalk was he the transfer from, was it from Grambling?
Yes, Scrambling State. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, he's pretty good. Glad San Jose State was able to hold on to him there. So the rushing attack can't be good without a really good offensive line. Last year there was a lot of moving pieces. There also was not like a ton of depth last year, but it seems like I'm not seeing like a ton of yellow with the transfer portal here on this depth chart that I pulled up. Are there a number of returnees from last year on the offensive line?
Yes, there definitely is. And if I'm being honest, the one I'm most excited to see is Joseph Harbert, who is our center. He's 6'3", 300 pounds. He's listed on the web roster. Um, Last year, he didn't play toward till the end of the season due to injury. But we saw them bring him in the Stanford game. And after that game, I remember asking both the O-line coach and Craig Stutzman and Coach Ken as well about why he started because he'd kind of been out and they kind of kept him, on the back burner. And they put him in because of his size. And I think he's a physical run blocker. And I think in the interior offensive lineman, I think he'll be a stalwart and a kind of leader for that group going forward.
And there seems to be a lot of quality players here because like Hudson Mesa, um, Sion
Sione.
Namani, yeah, Sione,
Yeah.
Tyler Shen. There's a lot of guys here with some upside and like pretty good frames here. So is there some quality depth here? Like if a couple of injuries were to occur on the offensive line, they can still have guys that can step in and do a good job.
Yes, definitely. And all those three names you mentioned got some playing time last year. So I'd feel confident in all those three with their experience now. You mentioned uh, Mesa, Hudson Mesa. He did start at center for a good portion of the year. Tyler Chen started at center at the beginning of the year, moved to guard. So I think that interior offensive line, especially, has a lot of depth in it, and also guys who could just play and who've had good amount of experience.
And the tackles, it looks like the left tackle position in particular is pretty young. What's the floor and ceiling for both tackle positions though?
I'm not too educated on the tackles right now, if I'm being honest. What were the names you had again?
Uh, Nate Hale, last name Brown. Trying to pull up
Oh yeah.
Mitchell Brown, and then McConey, the sophomore.
Yes. So I think that is like the three guys, those three guys you mentioned. I think they all are very young, and I think from what I understanding is the belief is more in the interior offensive line. I think these guys are still going to develop. I'm not too up to date on these guys, if I'm being honest.
Got you. So flipping things over to the defensive side of the football. Last season, they had lost some defensive linemen. I think it was in the winter portal and then maybe an additional one in the spring a year ago. And that was a question entering the season. But they had still some upperclassmen that just hadn't got a lot of time. And it looks like a lot of those guys are back because I see a lot of seniors on in the defensive line room. Is that correct? It's an upperclassman led group.
Yes, definitely. There's a lot of guys there. I think there'll be a big rotation, and some guys that stood out to me were definitely, well, one guy in particular is Quincy Lakia, who missed all of last season, almost all of last season after playing a few games with the wrist injury. He's like a DN type guy, and I think he'll be a big piece going forward. Another guy that I liked last year as well was Nafa Fanga. He's a junior, redshirt junior, number 50. I think he'll play in that nose guard position, replacing Sawane Toya last year, who had a great year as a senior and graduated. So I think he's another guy that stands out as a junior. But there's a lot of guys in that defensive line. Justin Stern, he's kind of like a leader in the locker room, from my understanding as well. I mean, that's a very there's like a laundry list of guys who I think defensive coordinator Derek Odom feels comfortable with at those defensive line in his three front that he runs.
Do you
Reggie
think,
Jones, yeah.
yeah, like there's a lot of guys here. Do you think this could be one of the best defensive lines in the Mountain West?
Uh, I'm sure it can be. I think it's the depth that will, make it one of the top tier defensive lines in the Mountain West.
So yeah, so you think depth is more strength than having like dudes that take over like in the starting lineup?
Yeah, I don't know if there's been anybody to take over yet, but I'm not sure if we have a takeover guy. I don't know. I think it's hard in spring ball to judge because
That's
there's no tackles, so it's
yeah,
hard. But I think possibly there will be a guy. I'm not sure who. Maybe it's Quincy, just because we barely saw him last year, and I think he had a lot of time to sit and work out while he was recovering. I think it was like a hand or a wrist injury or something like that that kept him out last season. So going forward, maybe it's him. But I do think this group has some decent depth.
and then with the linebackers, how is the depth looking there? Are there any guys that stand out in your opinion? Is this a pretty strong room?
Yes, I think this might be the strongest room on defense right now. The guys I think of right away are Taniela Latu. Let's see, Jordan Pollard is another guy who is, I think, going to be a big piece on the defensive side, and Noah McNeil Franklin. Someone else that I kind of was asking about was this offseason was Brady Van Beneckham. He was someone who I guess stood out on defense for just kind of having a knack for the ball and pick, and he wasn't we saw him take get two interceptions in the spring game. It was like, whoa, we didn't really know too much about this guy. Like
Yeah.
I've kind of met him before and talked to him, but I didn't know he was kind of leading like the leaderboard in like picks and takeaways and big plays this spring, according to defense coordinator Derek Odom. He's like one of the top guys. He didn't say who is, but he said he's one of the top guys. So I think this is a very strong room. If I had to pick a leader, maybe Jordan Pollard stat wise, but I think it sounds like I know Taniela Latu was named a captain this season, so he's like more of the vocal leader. But it's a bunch of guys who I think lead by example. And there is some experience there too with Noah McNeil Franklin, who started getting some starts and more playing time at the end of the year, taking over Jordan Cobb's spot last season.
Yeah, it looks like a really good room. And then in the secondary, so I know they lost both of their starting corners to the portal from last year, both their starting corners from 2024. But they most recently got a former four-star guy from USC. Um, I'm forgetting, I think it's Malachi. I forgot his last name. Um, can pull it up in my notes here shortly, but there are some returnees as well at the corner position. Jalen Boehner, and and then they have another Malachi actually at the star position. Ethan Powell's a returnee. There's yeah a good amount of returning production here, at least at the safety positions. But I'm curious how the corners look without their starters from last year.
Yeah, so losing and DJ Harvey to USC, huge losses for San Jose State. Who stood out in the bowl game? Let's see. Some guys who stood out in, I mean, not the bowl game, excuse me, in the spring game. I think Kwan Bullard stood out. And he's been a guy that's been on this roster for a while. And I think he was originally at San Jose State as a wide receiver, and they switched his position to DB. I think he's a kind of a bit of a leader, and also on, off the field and on the field. I think he had some breakups in that game. Some other guys that you mentioned as well, like Jalen Boehner, we saw him get some decent playing time last year, and I think he'll continue going forward to get that playing time. What other guys I had listed down? Let's see, sorry, there was Marziel Smith who got some playing time. Um, Missing a name here. Where did I write this? Oh, Renier Norton. There it is. He stood out. He had an interception where he kind of there was a 50-50 ball that I remember seeing just vividly, kind of right in front of me in the press box, where he just got an interception on a 50-50 ball and kind of snatched it from the wide receiver. So that guy stood out to me the most during the spring game with his interception. He's a JUCO transfer originally from all the way back from Florida.
Okay, that's what it is. Okay, I'm seeing some of these colleges. So he's played at Catawba College and then El Camino College. Okay.
Yeah, I think El Camino was his most recent stop before coming here. And he just stood out for me from that athletic play. There was a lot of guys though that stood out. I think they still have some question marks. Um, Not question marks, but they're still trying to figure out who's going to start. I don't think they have an idea of who it's going to be yet.
Safety, I'm guessing they feel a little bit more confident with, like you mentioned. Um, or Isaiah,
Revis.
yeah, Revis, and then
Yeah.
Ethan Powell's back at the star position, and it looks like they have some quality depth here returning as well. How's the safety? How are the safeties looking?
The safeties are looking good as well. I think Isaiah Revis is. We saw him make a playmaker last year, and I think he's kind of that leader, and he'll be that guy on the back end of the defense this year. If I had to pick one, I think it would be him. But Ethan Powell's another guy too who got some playing time last year. So I think that's a big thing for this defense is just guys who have been in the system and have gotten the playing time. And the safety position, I think we got a couple, guys who are going to produce well and who have produced in the past. So they've kind of proven their spots here at San Jose State.
Yeah, when I look across the starting lineup defensively, you mentioned a lot of experience, and you're right. I mean, I'm going to go down the depth chart here. The starting, at least of the current projected starters: senior, 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 junior. If the transfer from El Camino College ends up starting at one of the corner spots, and then the safeties is Jalen. I'm not sure how to pronounce his last name there. Applet Williams.
Yes, Jaw. His nickname's Jaws, Jaw. So
Okay.
Jalen Williams, he's another guy who's not only, I think he's one of those guys who's also a big leader in the locker room. He hasn't gotten as much playing time in the past, but I think they're very high on him as well. He's another name that I hear a lot as a leader, and he kind of a lead by example guy. So I wouldn't be surprised to see him as well get some playing time this year.
Got you. So when you're looking across this team and looking across the two and the three deep, what position groups do you think would have, or what position group, individual position group, has the biggest drop off from first to second string? And it would be a position where it's like, hopefully no one gets hurt there.
Hmm. I was originally thinking it would be quarterback. And I still think I might lead that way just because I think Walker Egan, having the experience he's going to have going into this season, I think he's a huge like part of the team. He's your starting quarterback, but the depth worries me a little bit, just because obviously we know what Tama can do as a runner, but if what Walker provides as a passer in this offense, I think is super important. Uh, so I'm not sure if Tama as a freshman would be ready. So that would probably mean Xavier Ward would go in there. And we haven't seen too much from him in game. And when we have, it hasn't been great. I remember last year he threw a pick against Fresno. He also threw a pick in the spring game this year as well. So I think quarterback is that one position where I'm like, well, if we had to start somebody besides Walker, I'm not sure how it would go. And I don't know if our offense would function the same. So it feels a little flimsy. I could be wrong. Maybe Xavier would play well, and maybe Tama would have evolved by then. But that's the position where I'm like, man, I think Walker really needs to stay healthy for this offense to thrive.
And then if I'm gonna kind of swing things around and look at it from the opposite end of the spectrum, what position group on the team do you think, like for example, if San Jose State ended up playing for the Mountain West Championship this year, they had a huge breakthrough season, and you go back and look and you say it was because of this guy or this position group. So maybe outside of like a Walker at quarterback, who else would you say, or what other position group would you look at and say, if this group steps up, we have a shot to really have a huge season?
I think I think it would be on the defensive side, and I think it would be the linebacker groups, especially when I look at a guy like Jordan Pollard and Latu leading the group, as well as Noah McNeil Franklin. I think those three linebackers, and if Brady gets some playing time too, I think that might be the group where we look back and hey, maybe they weren't. Obviously, the offense, the wide receivers is another group that a lot of people would probably answer this question with their depth, but I think the linebacking core has some solid pieces there and some depth as well, but just at the top, I look at those two, Jordan Pollard and Latu, as two guys who would probably be the ones like, wow, like these guys definitely you need defense to win championships, right? That's the biggest
Yeah.
cliche in football. So I think those two guys are, especially in the linebacker core as a group, I think would be you look back and say that's why we won, the championship.
And yeah, so I live in DFW, and I know the phrase defense wins championships very well because we may have had a GM here in the Dallas area for the Mavericks say defense wins championships. So
Yeah, yeah. I wonder what you're talking about. Maybe he was right after the Lakers lost last night.
yeah. Well, really good job, Christian. I just one last question here for you. What is the expectation you think for San Jose State in Kenny's second year?
The expectation. I know from Ken's perspective, the expectation is championship. Well, his expectation going into every year, if I'm being honest, is playoffs. He thinks the Mountain West is if you go undefeated in the Mountain West, and obviously Texas is our schedule. So let's say that's the only loss. Playoffs is his expectation for the team. I think my expectation for the team and most people's expectation for the team would be to compete for the Mountain West Championship. I'm not going to say we're going to win or guarantee it, but compete, especially when you don't have to play teams like Boise State or UNLV in your regular season. I think that gives you a possibility to get closer and possibly enter into that Mountain West Championship game. And you'll also get to play Texas early on, which will be a fun test to see how you do against what could possibly be the number one team at that time if they beat Ohio State in week one.
Right. Uh, yeah, this is a especially in the Mountain West. This is a like a workable schedule. Like you said, you avoid the running Rebels of UNLV. You don't have to play the Broncos. And by the way, Boise State, like as good as they were last year, and I know they don't have Ashton Jeanty anymore, but they returned the most production in the entire G5 nationwide. That's kind of a scary thought. So, I mean, in terms of your path here for a potential Mountain West championship, it's not impossible. So, yeah, it'll be interesting because. Yeah, you don't have to play UNLV or Boise. Ask Colorado State last year. That normally pays off pretty well.
Yeah, it definitely does. And we also don't have to play Colorado State. Some other favorable games. We get to play Fresno at home. We went to Fresno last year, which should have been a closer game, in my opinion, and we got smoked. It's a rivalry game. I think it got too intense and they were a little too fired up, Coach Ken said. So having Fresno at home at that last home game of the year, I think is helps as well. Um, and the travel is not too bad if you look at it. Texas is our farthest road trip. Outside of that, we have Stanford, which is 30 minutes, away. Wyoming, Utah State, Nevada, and San Diego State are all of our other trips. So overall, it's not too bad of a travel schedule as well.
Yeah, and if you're looking to get a power conference victory, there's not too many teams that have as low of floors as Stanford does entering the
Yes.
season. So yeah, it's a winnable game. Um, well, again, Christian, you did a really good job. Tell the viewers one more time where they can find your content.
Yeah, so I'm very active on X, formerly Twitter. My username is at the C Vieira. That is Vieyra is my last name. C Vieira at the C Vieira. I'm also at the Spear at San Jose State. So we have our website is thespearsjsu.com. I'm the executive editor there, so you get to see a lot of our other writers write, and I edit a lot of their stories. And I'm also at the Mercury News or Bay Area News Group is kind of the umbrella over the Mercury News. So I write for them as well, freelance, covering San Jose State football. So yeah, that's where we can find me. You can find me, and yeah, that's about it. Yeah.
I just realized, so we have, several minutes left. So there's actually, I don't bring special teams up for every team, but there is some upside for the kicking unit for San Jose State this year. And let's see, his name is escaping my mind right now, but I believe he had two 50-plus yard field goals in the spring game. Is that correct?
Close, yeah. So Matthias Brown, he had a 53. I had him down as a 53 yarder and a 46 yarder. So, and he made all his PATs as well. So still, so I think Coach Ken was a little surprised after the game because we talked to him about that, and he says there before the spring game they were looking into getting more kickers in the transfer portal. I think they weren't super confident, but he said he felt like maybe Matthias Brown being in front of the fans because there was fans there and the crowd in general might have gave him a little adrenaline to boot those balls a little farther. And I think the team was surprised in a good way to see Matthias Brown nail those two field goals, 53 yards, 46 yards. And though some of those might have had a little bit of like, especially the 46-yard one, if I remember correctly, looked like it had like 5 more yards on it as well. And they were pretty much dead center from what I could see. So overall, I think they're very pleased with that guy after the spring game, seeing what he did in a simulation of a live match.
Gotcha, gotcha. Well, seems to be a lot of upside for San Jose State football and again a workable schedule. So yeah, I mean I guess the expectation this year for at least like you mentioned, Kenny's expectations every single year is to be a championship caliber team, but maybe the Mountain West championship game is not too far of a stretch for the Spartans this year. I'll be very excited to see how this team does this fall.
Yeah, me too. Me too. I'll be watching and hopefully covering it some if I still can. And yeah, a lot of it relies on Walker, I think, but we'll see.
Well, again, really good job, Christian, and we'll look to have you on again this time next year. And thank you for being on the channel.
Thank you, Connor. Appreciate you having me.
Yeah.